This is Koli Aziza with Mariama Learning, where we support early learners' needs. Today, I would like to talk to you about critical thinking skills for our early learners. So I want to talk about supporting their critical thinking skills because I really feel like humans are born with that. But of course, we can support them. Those of us who are working with them can support their ability to critically think. We see even when our children are developing, when they're really young as babies, they do things to try to navigate their environment and figure out what's going on in their environment, right? Cause and effect. If I knock this down, what's going to happen? If, I do this, what's going to happen? If I reach up and try to climb, what will happen to me? What can I get to? What can I get into? How can I navigate? So as humans, we're born with that. I think that's almost like a survival mechanism. And I think that as we support those critical thinking skills, our young people can take it to another level. But if we crush the human beings' natural curiosity, there are some that will push against it, and there will be others that will just not be so concerned about that. They will not be encouraged to investigate and analyze. Now, I wasn't originally going to talk about critical thinking skills, but just with what's going on in the world now, I thought that it would be very important. I think it is extremely important for us to talk about supporting our early learners in that area. It's imperative right now because I'm watching adults very confused about what's going on in the world and not always able to critically think and analyze and compare and contrast and dig deep into things. And a lot of us are just believing whatever we're told. And I just am very concerned about that and saddened by that. So I think it's extremely important that we dive deep into supporting our early learners with this, so that this becomes just a normal way that the humans investigate things instead of, and there will always be the person that doesn't. Some people just are not interested, but we need to do it even more and really start when they're young. There's my spiel, okay? So let's start off with some ideas I have for that. One is read. Read as much as possible to your children. And then, of course, when they start reading, just provide them with as many resources as you can, as many books as you can when you're reading to them. And of course, once they start reading and once they find topics that they're interested in, let them read as much about those topics as possible. Of course, you can buy books, but the libraries are open and we can go there and let our children explore. When you're reading books to them, it's important to, when I was in the early childhood classroom, actually teaching in the early childhood classroom daily, I used fiction and nonfiction. So for example, if your child is reading or learning about squirrels, you want to read, lots of times in early learning, you'll find that there are a lot of sort of cartoon-like characters in a lot of the stories. A lot of the illustrations are more like that, pretend stories, right? So fiction. So we want to provide them with that, of course, but then also provide them with the nonfiction. And that gives them a chance then to compare and contrast the fiction and the nonfiction. So in one story, of course, the squirrels may talk and they may talk to the other animals, but children will learn that squirrels they may talk, but they don't talk the way humans speak and talk. So in the nonfiction, they will see that. A nonfiction story about a squirrel may just tell you all about how squirrels gather their food and how they make it through the winter and how they make it through the seasons and all of that. And there may be a fictional story about that as well, but, there will be a difference. So providing them with the fiction and the nonfiction in whatever it is that they're reading will give them a chance to look at how are these different? How are they the same? And that is the beginning of analyzing and comparing and contrasting things. Again, when we're reading, fiction, nonfiction, ask those WH questions, whether you are reading the story to them or they're reading the story to check for their understanding. We have our simple WH questions: the what, the who, the where, the when, right? And lots of times the illustrators provide that information. Who's the story? Who's the story about? Where does the story take place? What is going on? The pictures are there in our early learners books to help them decipher that and give you the answers to that. Now, the why and the how questions are higher level thinking questions, and those answers aren't always on the page. Those things the child has to think through. And so we really want to ask those why and those how questions. And, that's important in leading to what was going on in the world. Like, why is this happening? How did it happen? Right? So those things are very important, the why and the how. And lots of times I would say with our early learners that we may see struggling a bit with comprehension, we tend not to ask those higher level thinking questions because we think that it's too much for them. And so what I would say with that is, never, your child, and so if it's too much, but I would always say model. So if you think they're not there yet, model for them how to answer that question. And I feel like if you model enough, children will eventually get it, unless they're just not able to at all for whatever reason. That's just, very difficult for them. But I would say have the expectation that they will get it and keep modeling for them how to answer those why questions. And then eventually they'll start asking the why questions, like why. And I know sometimes we're like, I don't really want to answer that right now. Can you just do what I'm asking you to do? But it's great if your child is asking those why questions, because now you understand and now you see that they will begin to question everything. And we want our citizens and we want humans to, at least I do, and I know most of the people that are around me want people to ask questions and not just do things just because they're being told to do it. Or just because, if that's a rule, why is it a rule? Like, I need to know, right? So that I can decide if I want to do that, right? Or if I want to be a part of that is important. So the why and the how. And then also other types of questions. Like, if you were the boy in the story, what would you do? And that's kind of an open-ended question. Who is the story about? Oh, a boy. But if you were the boy in the story, what would you do about that problem? Right? So then the child then really has to think, the early learner then has to think, what would I do? Right? So it gets you thinking beyond just the things that are there. You have to really critically think about, what would I do and why would I do that? Right? So it gets you get your child really thinking. So we talked about the fiction, the nonfiction. We talked about asking the WH questions. We talked about asking the why and the how questions. We talked about the open-ended question: if you were a boy, how, if you were a boy, what would you do? Okay, that's that. All right. And then for those why and how questions, I would say to do as many science activities and also cooking activities. Of course, the science, you have to critically think when you're doing science activities always. Like, you have the science, you have steps when you're doing a science investigation. And, we can get into that when we talk specifically about science. But of course, for example, a simple experiment like a sink or float, you're like, you would ask, well, why does this material sink? Why does this material float? And what were the steps that led us to this? How did we figure this out? How did we figure this particular thing out? How do we figure it out? There are steps. And so again, with cooking as well, how did we bake this cake? How did we make these cookies? There's steps, right? So it breaks down what you did. And that's a great thing for early learners to do, to break things down. Most things that we do have steps, right? And so cooking is just a fun way to incorporate those breaking those things down, or breaking things down into steps. Lots of times when things are happening in the world, we don't really know how we got here. We're here in this situation, but how did we get here? And lots of times people don't even go back and investigate and try to break down why it is we are where we are. So all those type of activities help your child through those thinking processes, okay? Or through that thinking process, okay? So we said reading, questions, fiction and nonfiction. The questions, the simple WH questions, the why and the how, the open-ended questions. Then we said science and cooking activities. And then we said, well, science experiments or science activities and cooking activities. And I would also say play. Play. Children love to play. And in their play, they will ask questions and they will make discoveries. And you can ask them questions. And I mean, don't harass them, but, let them play, because children just want sometimes to play. And they don't always want you in their space. But you'll know when it's time to go in and play with them as well, and work with them and play with them. And you can ask questions. When children are playing, I would encourage as much play together. As much play. Play with a group, playing alone, because you even learn when you're playing alone about, and you create situations and scenarios. So you even ask questions when you're by yourself, okay? And also when you're with the group. And I would also encourage you to, play with your children. And all kinds of things develop. You make up stories, you make up characters. There's all types of situations that happen when you play. Problems arise, and you have to solve them, right? So definitely play and make your home, or whatever space in the home you have, even if you have to take things and put them in a crate and then let your child pull them out. If you don't have a lot of space for play, have a little crate and put things in there that your child likes, and other things that they can experiment with and make a part of play. Because a lot of times children will take, something that is not something that you use for that. So I'll use this as an example, okay? So here are my glasses, right? I've seen children, if let's say they don't have a play phone, they might take the glasses and pretend the glasses are a phone. Children do that, right? They create and they problem solve. Well, shoot, I need to use a phone and I don't have a phone right here. So we're just going to pretend that these are a phone and I'm going to use them. So play allows you to think how to be resourceful and to think beyond what is right in front of you. And that's what we want to develop in our children. We want them to think beyond what is right in front of them, right? Also, encourage creativity as much as possible. All kinds of creativity. Visual art, just children making things from paper. I used to have a young person who was so creative, and he used to make all kinds of things in his house out of whatever his mom had. He was taking paper and making shoes, and his mom would call me and say, "This boy is doing all kinds." And I said, encourage it. Do not stifle his creativity, because he could be a tailor someday. Who knows what he will be able to do? But creativity in all forms encourages that critical thinking, right? Critical thinking is going to be a part of that, because it's like, well, how am I making these shoes? How am I putting it together? And you can also ask those why and how questions as your child is developing those things, whether it be a song, whether it be a dance, whether it be a painting, whatever it may be. And if you see that your child is interested in these things, bring them in. If somebody likes to drum, bring in the drums. Just encourage it as much as possible and just have it there for your child to see. Let them explore and see what it is that they like. Again, you have to critically think when you're doing all of that. Why? What is it about this particular song that you wrote that, what made you write this song? What sparked you? What sparked your brain to make this song? Why? Why do you think you even thought about that? And how did you put that dance together? What's the first step? What's the next step? What's the next step? So all of that helps develop critical thinking. All right, so we've said a lot, right? We've said the reading, we said the fiction and nonfiction, providing that for your child so they can compare and contrast, asking them the WH questions, the why and the how questions, the open-ended, if you were the boy, what would you do and why? And the science, encouraging and providing them with as much science and cooking activities. And also we said play and creativity. We want to encourage that as well. The other thing I would say as we end is to provide your child with as many different experiences as possible, where they're around all different kinds of people, if you can, that are doing different things. So that when they are, and I know that everybody, everyone may not have the opportunity to do this, but I would say to do that as much as possible so that when someone says something that does not match your child's experience, they can say, well, that's kind of strange because that's not my experience. Just as something as simple as someone saying that elephants, let's say, don't drink water. Let's just use that as an example, okay? And your child has been to the zoo, right? And knows that elephants drink water because they saw an elephant drinking the water at the zoo. And then somebody says, no, elephants don't drink water. Then your child can say, well, no, wait a minute. No, I went to the zoo and the elephant does drink water. So what you're saying doesn't really make any sense. That's not true. So I would definitely encourage you, that's just an example of giving your children as many experiences as possible. The zoo, the aquarium, if you can take trips. Some people are able to go abroad. Some people are able to travel to different states in the United States, go to all different kinds of parks and places, all over the world. Some people are able to go to museums. Some people are able to go to the Kennedy Center in Washington, D.C. Some people are able to go to plays. But if you're not able to do all those things, you can go to the park. You can walk around the neighborhood. If you're living in a place where you feel like you want to do that. I think it's very important for us to expose our children to as many different environments as we possibly can so that they can learn that and be around people and things that are not like their environment so that they can learn something different, so that then when they are around someone, or if they read something, or if they hear something that doesn't match with their experience, they can then say, that's not my experience. That is not my experience. And even if, it might not be the experience, but there may be some validity to what the other person is saying, well, then they can have a conversation about it, right? But my experience is different from yours. And I did have an experience. So, we can have a conversation, but I'm not just going to let what you tell me ride. I'm not going to let it just go with me saying, oh, I agree with you, because I can't, because I had an experience. So definitely expose your children to as many different environments and people who are different that you can, right? So that they can understand that there are differences, and they're not just going to take what people say as face value, because they know something different. They have had a wide amount or varied amount of experiences. So those are all the different things, my ideas, some ideas that I've used in the classroom to support my early learners that I've worked with, their critical thinking skills. And I hope that helps. I will provide some articles in the description box. Just look for it. But it is very important to support our early learners' critical thinking skills so that they can go out in the world and think for themselves and examine and investigate and evaluate things that are happening around them, things that they read, things that are happening around them, things that people say to them, right? We want to raise human beings who are thinkers and who don't just let whatever is being said to them ride. We need to encourage and promote, now more than ever, thinking people. Okay? So the next time we meet at Mariama Learning, I would like to just provide some more examples of how to promote critical thinking and support critical thinking in our early learners with some graphic organizers that lots of times we use for children that are a little older and for adults. But I think that it's important to start that when they're young, and I've always done that. And even if it may seem a little hard for them, it's a great way to get them going and get them to see how you're thinking through things, so that as they get older, when they're introduced with these things, they'll, be able to recognize what their parents are providing and what educators are providing to them to help them think through things and evaluate and compare and contrast. All right, so thank you very much. This is Koli Aziza with Mariama Learning, where we support early learners' needs.